Sorry. Hi, sorry, I'm just going to speak on one of these promises. Obviously, and it's a growing problem that most of us these days are becoming aware of, and more recently we've probably become aware of it as it's been in the news with, I believe, one of the Conservative Party's advisors, David Cameron's advisors, recently went to work for longer. But basically I want to speak about the promise, which was number 86, which Labour will crack down on loan sharks, campaign for action against high interest, high street lenders, encourage residents to use ethical and responsible financial services. Well, there's probably a number of things that the Labour Party can be doing in Glasgow in relation to this, and that is putting more funding into the trade and standards departments and putting more funding into the actual the loan shark teams that they have to actually basically tackle illegal loan sharks. But in relation to the actual payday lenders, basically, I think they've actually overstated what they can do, because in relation, they certainly can put more resources into promoting credit unions and responsible lenders like credit unions. But the payday loan problem that's arisen over the last couple of years has really arisen because the roots of it basically stem from the credit crunch. At the moment, it's a financial problem. The fact is that most people cannot, and it's to do with the welfare reform, and it's only going to get worse with welfare reform when we see cuts in benefits. But essentially, more and more people these days are finding it harder basically to make ends meet. And in the past, what you'd have done is you'd have went to your bank, you would have probably got an overdraft extension. And at the moment, banks aren't giving overdrafts, so more and more people are now actually starting to use payday loans. There is some action taking place, for example, in relation to the Scottish Parliament. I mean, the big problem with payday loans is the high interest rates that they charge, which is usually about 4 to 5,000% APR, is actually a reserved matter for the UK Parliament, and it's not something even the UK government, the Scottish Parliament can do. Never mind the Labour Council. However, there is action that the Scottish Government could be taking against payday loans. And one of these actions, recently there was round-table talks in the Scottish Parliament, which I was involved in. And basically those actions were to actually try and encourage, there's a Scottish Government scheme at the moment called the Debt Arrangement Scheme, which allows people who have got debts to basically get the interest and the charges frozen in their debts very quickly, which basically means in effect an interest-free loan. Now at the moment that scheme is available for people to use. The problem is it takes about 2 or 3 months to set up. So at the moment there is actually a call for money advice services and citizens advice bureaus throughout the country to try and get the government to change the legislation so that the debt arrangement scheme can be used to actually freeze the interest and charges on payday loans from a very early stage, which would at least mean that although people would still have these debts, the interest that they'd be charged in thousands of percent APR would be stopped immediately. In effect, it would be converted into an interest-free loan. Other things that the Scottish Government, the Labour Government Council could actually be doing at the moment, though, is putting more money into advice services like citizens advice bureaus, money advice services in Glasgow. Because at the end of the day, you can change the law, you can change basically the rules in terms of legislation and how these debts are dealt with. But what you do need to change is you actually need to be able to give people advice. You need to be able to give people resources that they can access in order to seek that advice. There is one thing another suggestion that's been made forward in addition to changing legislation in the Scottish Parliament in terms of the debt arrangement scheme and supporting credit unions and supporting advice centres. Another suggestion has actually been made for the Scottish Government to give money, and local councils as well, to give money to issue health warnings. Well, not health warnings, wealth warnings, in the same way that health warnings are issued at the moment. I mean, we're always telling people they shouldn't smoke, we're always telling people they shouldn't drink, but we give very little information to people about actually how to manage their finances and basically the dangers and the risks of going to payday lenders. What is very disappointing though, this suggestion was made to the Minister for Energy, Enterprise and Tourism, Fergus Ewing, and if I can just quote what his response to that was, and that is, it is not appropriate for the Scottish Government to discourage people from obtaining credit which is offered to them in a legal, fair and transparent way. So in relation to payday loans, I think there is a lot of things that the Labour Government can do, and so the Labour Council can do. They can certainly give more support to advice centres. They could probably do a lot more in terms of supporting trade and standards and to regulate these organisations and ensure that they're actually complying with the Consumer Credit Act. They could do a lot more to support credit unions. In Glasgow Credit Union recently just stopped its current account. It's one of the few places that a lot of people, where they've got a bad credit rating, can actually get a current account which they can pay their bills through. And unfortunately, Glasgow Credit Union, which is the biggest credit union in Scotland, or one of the largest credit unions in Scotland, actually cancelled their current account. So more support can be given to Glasgow Credit Union to actually restart their current accounts again. But finally, I think there is also things that the Scottish Government can do as well. The responsibility doesn't lie purely on the shoulders of the Labour Council. And basically, if the Scottish Government, if that's the attitude, in my view, of the Energy, Enterprise and Tourism Minister, then the problem just doesn't lie in Glasgow City Council, but further afield as well.
Glasgow City Council owns Scott Cash.
George Redmond owns one of the credit unions, his mother does as well.
They own Scott Cash, and the interest rates that they're charging is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And one of the head of the planning department for Glasgow City Council he took early retirement and he got £450,000 payoff, and he's now sitting on the board. Scott Cash.
Well, the idea was, I mean, part of the thing about Scott Cash, I mean, I don't know a huge amount about it. I was aware that, I sort of obviously working in the advice sector, and I'm aware it's there. The idea with Scott Cash was it was supposed to be an alternative to payday loans. The big problem you've got with credit unions is, to some extent, if you're needing cash, basically, immediately, you're not going to get money for a credit union, in the sense that most credit unions you will need to have shares, and it's a long-term strategy with credit unions, because you actually save your money there, you build up shares, and then you can actually get loans at very low interest rates, and very small loans as well. Most credit unions will lend you £50. You will never get £50 loans from a bank, and you might get an overdraft extension, but you won't actually get a loan for £50 from a bank. But a credit union will give you a loan for £50. They'll also give you an interest rate of probably about 10%, whereas actually most banks for a loan, even the £500, you're probably paying about 20% APR. So credit unions should be encouraged, and it's a longer term strategy about encouraging people to save money and actually basically borrow sensibly and then pay back when they need it for emergencies. Scott Cash was really there to try and fill a gap, in the sense that if somebody needs cash right now, do you know what I mean? And that's the market.
The interest rate's dead high.
But it is that high, but they're supposed to be a bit more responsible, and I don't believe their interest rates are anywhere near as high as they are for other organisations like Wonga, for example. You're talking about 45,000% APR. They're also supposed to have a social responsibility. I'm not saying that basically Scott Cash is the answer. There's possibly, but the problem is there's a longer term problem. There's a longer term problem in terms of how you regulate consumer credit businesses. There's a longer term problem about how you actually put money in people's pockets so they don't need to actually borrow. There's a longer term problem about the cost of living in this country, and especially in relation to fuel poverty. There's a longer term problem in terms of the social fund and how it's been cut, and it's harder and harder to get that crisis loan or a budgeting loan, or even a community care grant. There's a lot of long term problems, but what the payday loan companies are actually, what they're basically exploiting is the fact that people need immediate cash right now, and basically they're using new information and technology to basically make a decision within 15 minutes and get the cash into somebody's account and give them it. Now, there's no really an alternative to that at the moment. That's the problem. There isn't an alternative. The credit unions are a long-term alternative, but there isn't any short-term alternative.
But see, the credit unions, I know 3 people that speak to the credit unions, and what happens was they've took breakdowns and financial difficulties, lost their jobs and that. So their loans that they got, they went to try to get them to reduce to pay, and they wouldn't even accept it, and they actually took them to court. Now, taking them to court costs money. Instead of